Actions absolutely speak louder than words, and I want to start by paying tribute to the very brave and committed students of Trinity College who, after 5 or 6 days of a sit-in, managed to get full boycott divestment from the Israeli state, from the authorities in Trinity. That is a very, very hopeful sign in the midst of what is a desperate and hopeless situation as Israel moves to its next stage of onslaught against the people of Palestine and threatens the ground invasion of Rafah. Interestingly, this morning, Joe Biden made a statement to say that he will not provide any more bombs. One shipment of bombs has been refused. That's a small amount of weaponry compared to what the USA have already provided to Israel, but that is progress, and that is an amazing thing to see. And where did that incentive come from? Where did that impetus come from? It came from the students across America who are occupying colleges there and driving from below the absolute imperative on our rulers across the world to do something, not just talk, but to act. And the students have acted, and they are being listened to. And there's a historic context to this. The students acted when the Vietnam War was at its height. The students across America, across Europe, across Britain occupied and took action and began the end of the Vietnam War. The same is true of apartheid in South Africa. Student action began the end of apartheid and fed into a movement that spoke to the rulers of the world, that said, do something, act, you must act now. So when are you going to act? Instead of just talking about what needs to be done and, bemoaning the fact that there's terrible genocide, children are being killed, the scenes are horrific, when are you going to actually do something that will force the hand of the Israeli state to back off, to stop the genocide? And we have an obligation legally under the Genocide Convention to do something, not just to sit in our hands and wait and see what happens, whether the European Union meeting will be called, the European Council meeting will be called or not. We have to act, and I think we should now start taking a leaf from the book of students. The young people, the locked out generation who can't get homes, who are living in their mammy and daddy's box room, who have to emigrate when they finish their education because they can't afford to live in this country, have been inspiring, and they have been courageous, and they have gone the whole 9 yards, and they are at this in America, across Europe and across Britain as we speak. What they're trying to say is to people like you who rule these democratic countries, do something. It's not just about being cool, young and a student, it's about speaking to the adults who are well paid, well resourced and powerful in this world to actually take action, stop the genocide, stop the slaughter of children, and tell Israel this is not acceptable. Apartheid must end and the occupation of Palestine must end.
Thank you, Deputy Smith.
First of all, I don't rule, I'm elected. As everybody else in this House is, and we're democratic. We have a parliamentary democracy in this country, which I respect, and I respect the views of all citizens. And I'm under no illusion about the strength of feeling across the entire Irish people about what's happening within Palestine and within the Palestinians in Gaza in particular. And my own party has been consistently supportive of a Palestinian right to its own state, and indeed the entire government. In our programme for government, 3 parties put together a commitment to recognise the state of Palestine, again coordinating with other member states and other countries to try and have as big an impact as possible, to try and give momentum to the question of recognition. And we have been very active. It's not just words. And we've been very focused on all areas: diplomatic, legal, humanitarian, political. Every avenue at our disposal where we can have practical and real impact, we have been pursuing. And the humanitarian, I believe Ireland stood up, probably one of the first, if not the only one, first to stand up and say, stop the attempts to undermine UNRWA, stop pulling back funding from UNRWA, and I think we've been effective on that front. And that's acknowledged by UNRWA and by others, that because Ireland stood up and sort of said, okay, it's not just words, it's action. And on the legal front, we've already one of the few countries to make an oral submission to the ICJ case on the advisory opinion from the UN. and the Attorney General made what I thought was a substantive contribution to the court, following on a very substantive written legal submission that we had made back, I think, in July of either 2023, I think, if I can stand corrected. So we've been consistent in these issues even before this terrible war started. We've worked hard to secure the safe passage of many Irish citizens out of Gaza, and that's been effective. Over 100 now are out of Gaza. We've made it clear we're going to legally intervene in the International Court of Justice on the case initiated by South Africa. But that's going to take time, and I'm not saying that in itself, but it does speak to the issue of accountability. Israel has to be held accountable for what it has done through the international court system. And we do have to advocate with other countries to win other countries over to our position. And I think we've been affected at, given where we started, Ireland would have been considered outliers within the European Union, actually, on this question, in terms of the positions we have consistently adopted. But actually, I think a majority now within the EU are very much in line with our position in terms of an immediate ceasefire, in terms of release of hostages, and in terms of a political process to resolve this on a more sustainable basis.
Bríd Smith.
Well, Taoiseach, I have not denied that you have said a lot, and that you've said a lot diplomatically, legally, and about humanitarian criticism on stopping the aid to UNRWA. You've said a lot. What I'm asking you is, what are you going to do? And the question of deed is what's at the heart of my argument here. See, I was a young shop steward when the Dunnes Stores strike against apartheid happened. I knew Karen Gearan and Mary Manning very well. For 3 years, they stayed on the picket line in Henry Street, and after 3 years, the government in this House brought in legislation to ban the importation of South African fruit and vegetables. But it was 3 years of a struggle by ordinary, decent young workers. And now we're seeing the struggle by ordinary, decent young students to try and get people like you, the rulers of the world, and I'm calling you ruler. I understand you're an elected ruler, but you have much more power than I have. If it was within my power, the Israeli ambassador would have been put out of here long ago, and you could do it, and this government could do it, but you're refusing to do it. I love your talk, but we need action. Children are dying as we speak, dying of famine. Places are being bombed as we speak, and we face the potential of an absolute catastrophe in Rafah. We face that potential still, even after Joe Biden saying, I'll refuse to send one shipment of bombs to Israel, following all the other stuff I've sent. You need to act. And act means sanctions. And sanctions can be anything from refusing their services, ending the contract with HP that we have in this House with Hewlett-Packard, expelling the Israeli ambassador. Take action, like the students have done in the States and in Trinity, and they have made a difference.
Taoiseach, please.
But Deputy, we have taken action. And you're being very disingenuous. We have taken action as a country. We've taken action long before this war and throughout this war. We were one of the first again to support the NGOs that Israel had, in our view, wrongly labelled as being supporters of terrorism. We continued our support for those NGOs, who were human rights organisations, with finance and with support, and we've met them. And I've already instanced the UNRWA situation and wider supports that we give to the Palestinian state in terms of support of education and support of healthcare. That's action, Deputy. That's not words. That's action. Practical action. You speak a lot.
Not
Deputy,
working.
no one speaks
you
more.
You need to do more.
You speak a lot as well. So
you need to do more.
I'm not just about talk. I'm about action. Practical action. And the hard yards of trying to persuade people.
That's going to take a long time.
What happened ultimately, the political accommodation in South Africa involved people making momentous steps on all sides in terms of truth commissions and everything else. Ultimately, if we want Palestinians and Israelis to live side by side in harmony, there's going to have to be a political resolution.
So while they slaughter the Palestinians, we wait for them to live in harmony?
No one in this House, everybody in this House has condemned the bombardment of Gaza. Everybody has to be fair. But what I'm trying to say is that what's essential ultimately, there's no other way. It's like what happened in Northern Ireland.
Okay,
30 years people were bombing and maiming each other. People are now living together in harmony and in peace. That ultimately has to happen in the Middle East. Otherwise there will not be sustainable peace there.
If
We have to work
Palestinians
at
are
that,
still
and
alive,
that's hard work.
if Palestinians are not expelled and dead.
Deputy, if you want to have a conversation
I don't want
with
to
the
have a conversation.
Taoiseach, have it with them outside. We've set
don't want a
time
conversation with
for
him.
questions here, and we have to have some regard for the rules, please.